All right. Welcome, Security Simplified podcast listeners. This is episode 13. Joining me is my good friend, Mr. Ryan Cloutier. Ryan, say hi.
Hi, Evan. How are you, sir?
Good, man. We're recording in the morning, so a little bit loopy this morning, but that's okay.
Definitely not a morning person, but I am excited about busting myths. I feel like I woke up this morning and I said, today we get to be a myth buster.
Let's do it. So I'm going to go ahead and share this. So this was a talk that I gave to the Minnesota Counties Computer Cooperative, which is a consortium of counties here, and figured this would be a great, I think our listeners will find a lot of use in it. So this is part of the incident management series. In episode 12, we talked about the support. How do you build support for an incident management program? And today let's talk about busting some of the most common information security myths. So that's the plan. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can, talk about what, you can talk about what I'm talking about. So we're on the same page.
I like this.
Yeah, communication. So here we go. Myth number 1. I'm not a target. So why do I care? I don't have anything any attacker would want. Why do I need an incident management program?
I hear this one. I've heard this one several times yet this week. And, you have something. You either have data, you have computational resources, you have employees who have relationships to other potential targets. So no matter who you are, how big you are, you absolutely have something the attacker's interested in.
You've heard this before, everybody's always got something somebody else wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or one man's garbage is another man's treasure. So trying to predict what attackers want and what they don't want it's a futile effort, for one. And most of the attackers that are coming after these people who think this way, most of those attackers are motivated by money. And if you're an easy target for more money, meaning a high return on investment, you're a target, period. And so if you don't know what you look like to the outside world, if you don't know what you look like to an attacker, doing something like a quick attack surface analysis, which can be as simple as just a vulnerability scan of your entire IP address space, to start, you'll see how attractive you look to an attacker. So you are a target. People do make mistakes. People do click on links that we don't want them to click on. People do fall for phishing attacks. So if you can guarantee that none of those things are ever going to happen, that a bad thing is not going to happen, then you've got a case for not having an incident response plan or management program. If you can't claim that, well, then you just made the case. So, yeah, we've all heard that one a billion times. How about this one?
And if nothing else, you're a bot in a botnet.
Yeah, right? You're churning somebody else's, you're mining somebody else's Bitcoin. Thank you very much. Right. So the second one, I don't need a plan. I just call my cyber insurance company.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. Well, let's get one thing straight. When you, cyber insurance is a good thing, but you have to put it into context. The incident responders, the cyber insurance company itself does not work for you. Period. They don't want to pay a claim. They're in business to make money. They're in business to make a profit. So if there's any way that they don't have to pay a claim, they're not going to pay a claim. They're not going to go the extra mile for you to make sure that your incident response was handled correctly. They're going to stop the incident, contain it, maybe do a little bit of root cause analysis, pay the claim and send you on your way. They're not going to do it right. So it's no excuse for not having a plan. Ryan, you got anything to add to that one?
Yeah, actually, in our current climate, the lack of a plan could be the deciding factor between eligibility for coverage or not. So, the insurance companies are seeking every conceivable reason right now to deny the claim or to limit the scope of the claim. And one thing that we have started to see is the lack of a response plan, the lack of basic hygiene, starting to be considered potential negligence or breach of contract with regards to the policy for due care due diligence. So you definitely don't want to give them a foothold or another excuse to be able to deny or reduce coverage.
100%. So, quick question. You said hygiene. If Gene is sober, he's not hygiene anymore.
This is true.
Yeah. Or if he gets off the desk, he's low Gene.
He's low Gene? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. No, so this is absolutely no excuse for not. And I love how you took that other angle because you could get denied coverage because you don't have an incident response plan. And I've got so many stories. You can hit me offline. You can hit Ryan offline of where if we rely on the cyber insurance company to manage the incident response, how that's actually ended up in a really, really bad spot. In one case, it was cheaper and a better approach to rebuild the environment than it was to pay the claim, but the cyber insurance company wouldn't pay for that. That was not in coverage. So what was covered was paying the ransom, and so we don't do that. So what happens is the cyber insurance company has a negotiator, negotiates the ransom payment with the attacker, and this takes about 3-4 days. And then after that 3-4 days, the client gets a call and says from the FBI and says, you can't make the payment. And why can't we make the payment? Well, because they're on the OFAC list. The OFAC list is, organizations that are known to support terrorism. So,
or that are on sanctions. So be very aware that the Conti ransomware group, who has now been pretty cleanly tied to the Russian intelligence community, that group now is being considered active war, which is an exclusion in your clause. And you also have the issue, like Evan had pointed out, about the Office of Foreign Asset Control, or OFAC, which, with the current geopolitical issues we're dealing with Ukraine and Russia, more and more organizations that are known to do ransom will now fall in scope of either OFAC or acts of war. So having a response plan is paramount because you might not have the support that you thought you did 6 weeks ago from your insurance carrier.
Well, and at the end of the day, what happened was there was no coverage because you couldn't pay the ransom, and the company was left with having to rebuild the environment anyway, and none of it was covered. So having an incident response plan, absolutely no excuse. So now the next myth, so we've covered 2 myths so far. One is I'm not a target. 2 is, well, I've got cyber insurance. Number 3 is, well, I've never had an incident. I've never had an incident before. So why would I worry? And we've heard that. Well, it's never happened before, so I'm fine. Okay. But we don't plan for the things that happened in the past. We plan for the things that are probably going to happen in the future. And in episode 12, we talked about the logic behind incident response, and it is inevitable. It will happen in your future. You live long enough, you will have an incident, and if you're not prepared for it, it's going to hurt more. That's it.
Well, and anecdotally, those of us in this game with gray hair understand if you think you haven't had an incident, it isn't that you haven't had it, it's that you don't know about it.
Very true. Very, very true. When we build an information security program, typically you start with the risk assessment so that you know where your most significant risks are. And very, very early on in the process, and it might even be before we do an asset inventory, it's build an incident response plan. And the reason is when you're doing your asset inventory, you'll stumble across, oh my gosh, what is this? You dig in a little bit and you're like, oh crap, we've had an incident. And so having that plan, even before having an asset inventory, you could make a case for that. It's that important.
I 100% agree.
All right. So the next myth is, well, not so much a myth, but we've heard this before from management. Well, if I know about something, if I know that something's broken, then I have to fix it. Therefore, if I don't know about it, I'm fine. So ignorance is bliss, is what I call that. And it's not bliss, it's more likely breach. So this is no excuse. Ignorance used to be acceptable, to be honest. A few years ago, you could claim, when a breach happened and you get drug into court, which is not uncommon. We have a very litigious society. You could claim, well, I had no idea. And, oh, okay, well, that I could understand how you wouldn't know. And, you wouldn't be found negligent, which then means you didn't have to pay whatever you're being sued for. Well, that's kind of gone now. It's not an excuse anymore.
Like I tell people all the time, it's not 1992, it's 2022. The rules of the game are a little bit different, and the expectations of minimum due care, due diligence are very different.
100%. Yep. So, and you can use this word. It certainly, last episode we talked about building the case. One of the things that will resonate with executive management is to be defensible, to be in a position where when a bad thing happens, you're in a defensible position, meaning you can defend yourself in court. You can improve your chances of not being found negligent and not having to pay potentially millions of dollars in fines and or lawsuits. So,
well, and I'll just expand real quick on that. Also, defensible within your environment and your network. By having an incident response plan, you're more capable, generally speaking, of actually defending against the attack or repelling the attack before it has a chance to cause more significant damage.
Yep, for sure. And I was talking to Oscar Makes at FR Secure, who leads that incident response team yesterday, maybe the day before. And he had a great example of an organization that had an incident, didn't have an incident response plan, but took the recommendations seriously and really invested the time, not a lot of money, but the time in building a good incident response plan. And 6-7 months later, they get another incident, and they were actually, because they had invested the time and effort in the plan, they were able to identify that they were breached and stop the attack before the detonation of the ransomware, potentially saving themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there you go. I told them to write a case study about that. Here's another myth.
Nice.
So we have an incident, and oh my gosh, jump on it. Go, act fast. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. That's a myth. Incident response isn't about acting fast. It's about not wasting time. If the rule of thumb in an incident response is if you're moving too fast to document everything, you're moving too fast. So oftentimes when you have an incident, you act out of panic. You don't have time to really stop and think about what you're actually up against. And you move too fast. So it is possible to move too fast in an incident response. Don't want to waste time, but take your time. Make sure that you're approaching the incident logically, more logically and less emotionally. You ever seen this myth? You ever seen this myth, Ryan, where people just and go, and they're stepping all over?
Yes, and not only that, but I've had to battle the unplug the data center. Right? We're just shut it all down, shut everything down, just pull the network cables. Okay, we can do that, and that will stop this moment. But we're probably going to lose evidence. We're probably going to get hit again when we turn everything back on. Going slow enough to be sure of what you're doing, I think is a very sound piece of advice. And the rule of thumb, I live it. It absolutely is true. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things we don't want in an incident response is to make it worse. And I think sometimes when we act too fast, we do end up making it worse. Where if you take a step back, take a minute, and I've actually kicked people off of my own incident response teams temporarily because you can sense that they're in a little bit of a panic. It's, go take 15 minutes, go have a smoke, go have a drink or two, relax, come back, get your mind straight. What we need during an incident response is good, logical, thinking. Computers only do what you tell them to do. Computers aren't acting on emotion. So there's a reason we're seeing what we're seeing. Let's follow the trail of evidence. Let's try to figure out what took place. Let's try to contain it. Let's try to, reconstitute when the time is right, assuming we identified the source. But what we don't want is freak out and thinking about my job. And, if you're thinking about your job, it's probably good to have that resume updated anyway before an incident. But, slow down. All right. So that's myth number, I don't know what number we're on, 4 or 5 is, we got to act fast. Here's the next one. Incident response is best left to the experts. I'm not capable of doing an incident response. I've never been in an incident response before. So I'm just going to call the experts. I'm not even going to worry about it. I don't need a plan. I'll call FR Secure. I'll call Security Studio. I'll call whoever. That's a myth. It's not just for experts.
No. Experts can help ensure your plan is sound and solid and based in practical reality. But anybody can do this, and I'll tell you a quick little funny thing here. There was a client that I had several years ago, and we went through it, talked about needing to build an incident response plan, and we put it on the agenda item to pick up the following week. The next week's meeting, I get on the meeting and say, Ryan, we've wrote the plan. I said, really? This is great. Let's take a look. First step, cry. Second step, pray. Third step, call Ryan. This is not an effective plan. This is not a good plan.
Well, so, you totally left out the update the resume.
No, because they figured if they cried, prayed, and called me, they wouldn't need to update a resume. So, but your plan also doesn't have to be a tome. It doesn't have to be 900 pages of rigor for the sake of rigor. You can actually get by with a fairly lightweight plan with the appropriate support from experts when you get to those deeper areas.
Absolutely, man. And no two incidents are the same. So if we put some structure around an incident response and incident management, and that's why it's really important for us to plan ahead. You don't want to do this in the middle of an incident. You want to make sure that, okay, this is how it's going to flow. One, what is an incident? We need to define an incident. How is that different than an event? How is that different than a breach? What do these words actually mean? Use your own language. I can give you my language, but at the end of the day, what's your language that your organization speaks? Once you've figured that out, that's called incident identification. You've identified that an incident has taken place. The next step is, what kind of incident is it? Right? We don't have to get detailed. We don't have to get into forensics. This is just, is it a phishing attack? Is it, did somebody deface our website? Did somebody come in through 3389? I mean, just initial, easy stuff, right? And then that leads to an incident classification, and you can structure this so it sounds a lot less complex than it is, because it's really, really simple when I show you how to do it. But based on that incident classification, it's going to tell you where to go. Who do you call? Is this one where you actually do need to call the experts? This is bad. I need an expert. Or is this one where maybe your security team internally can handle it? Or is this one where your help desk can handle it? Most incidents, when you define what an incident is, you'll find are low severity incidents that your help desk can handle. You don't need an expert for this. Mm-hmm. So understanding that you don't need an expert. What you might need is some help building the plan, building the program. But seriously, anybody can do incident response up until a point, and then if it exceeds that point, then you call the experts. Save your money until then.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another myth. Another myth is, that's the same one. Another myth is incident response planning is too expensive.
So we will gladly provide you free incident response plan templates. You can contact FR Secure. You can contact Security Studio. Having an incident response plan does not have to be expensive. The biggest investment that you should put into incident response is not dollars, it's time. And and communicating with your various stakeholders and users and leadership to understand, what is their role, if any, during an incident. That's where you make the investment. Invest in the time and the humans. Paperwork is readily available for free. And you don't need to, this isn't a contract that you need to have somebody come in and build it unless you have a very complex environment. If you have a very complex environment, it is probably advisable to work with an expert. But that's a very small group of people in this world.
Absolutely. Incident response is, in most cases, it's free. And like you said, it takes a little bit of time and effort, but you'll find in that time and effort is so valuable even beyond incident response, because you're having conversations with people in the organization that you haven't had before. You get to learn new things about the way they do business, about what's important to them in this whole planning process. So don't think, it's work and I don't want to do it. There's so much more value. And here's a truth. 90+% of all your incidents are going to come from your lack of basics, your lack of fundamentals. It's not a blinky light. There is no easy button ever. There never will be to solve this problem for you. You have to plan. This is a human thing, and a blinky light's not going to solve it. The last myth, is the big guys. If the big guys, right? If the government, the federal government, for crying out loud, can't stop the attacks, how in the world are we going to, this little small company here in rural Minnesota, how are we ever going to stop it? That's a myth. And it's a myth because it's poor logic. It's not a myth because it's not true. Big guys can't stop them. We can't stop them. You can't stop them, but that's never been the point. The point has always been risk management, not risk elimination. So when a bad thing happens, what's my response going to be? That's the game we're playing. The game is not to prevent at all costs.
And I like to think of this like a sprinkler system or smoke detector, right? And fire drills, right? We can't stop. There's no 100% prevention of the likelihood of a fire occurring. We know this. We as a society have accepted this and created things like fire departments and fire hydrants. And there's an entire infrastructure and ecosystem that exists. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry because we know fire happens, but nobody's living in fear. Nobody's going, we can't possibly have a fire extinguisher in the building because you can't stop fire. We need a fire department to stop fire. No, we still have fire extinguishers, and if the fire gets too big, then we call the fire department. Yep. It's no different when we're talking incident response. And if you put that physical context on it, it becomes a lot easier to understand and digest, and makes it easier to communicate to your non-technical stakeholders.
100%. Yep, and I love that analogy. That's 100% accurate too. So that's it. That's some of the most common myths that we find when we're trying to build an incident response plan or an incident management plan. So we just busted those myths. Hopefully that all made sense, and that will help you in your practice of building your own program, making the case for your own program. Maybe you've run into these same myths, and now you've got a little bit of ammunition to go up against it. Next episode, we've got the most common incident management mistakes, which is kind of fun to cover because you can laugh at it afterwards playing Monday morning quarterback. But we'll just continue on with this series. We've got a whole bunch left to come. So with that, we'll close out. Ryan, you got any parting words?
Do something. Start somewhere. If today, when you're done with this episode, you open a Word doc and put in a header that says Incident Response Plan, click Save and Close, you've moved the needle.
Love it.
Do something.
Awesome, man. All right, we'll see you in episode 14. Take care.